and then flew a quad I just put together with HD0 and Ghost, and there's no comparison in terms of the nice low and consistent latency, and the graphics on the HD0 was fantastic. So it really gives you confidence. And then you get on the DJI system, and it's like, oh, okay, okay. Well, it's like the analogy of moving from a Ducati to my BMW. It's like, okay, all right, gotta chill a little bit.
All
And we
right.
have
We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Do appreciate having everybody here. It's kind of been a slow news cycle this time around, but I got some,
has.
Well, depending on
well,
what news you're
depending,
looking at.
like how much into the drama do you want to get, right? So which, we're relatively drama free. Now obviously it begs to mention there's, some stuff going on around the new Fat Shark Dominators. Um, and that'll be interesting to see how that kind of fleshes out. I did see a couple articles kind of mentioning, uh, you know, the involvement or lack of involvement of DJI, some of the ability to kind of copy or utilize tech that DJI has, or kind of what's the word? Uh, reverse engineer some of the tech to create some of the new. And I'm not saying any of that happened. I'm of the feeling that uh the more options people have, the more livelier the hobby is. And if people are still creating and innovating, that's a great deal. If it's for you, grab it. If it's not, continue using what you're using. I still use analog, so I still have a set of see, yeah, Dominator HD2s. So I mean, I'm old school. I like the big FOV, so
I'm
they work great.
I'm really with like XJet on this one. I'm curious to see what's out there, but I would not buy it until it was actually a delivered product that people had real reviews of. And
Absolutely.
all the chatter about whose is it, where's it come from, all that stuff. It's a little interesting to follow, but it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
until later on and we
Until
learn more things about it.
Absolutely. And I'm of the same.
The pre-order with the lack of detail is a bit insulting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, again, if you want to be one of those bleeding edge adopters, I mean, it's kind of like the PC space, right? If you want to be bleeding edge, you kind of got to deal with some of that involvement. I mean, even the Orcas, when that was kickstarted, a lot of people didn't know what was actually going to be delivered. So, and Orca has really kind of built a fan base. I think Alex, you use Orcas, right? So,
Yep. I'm on an
and
Orca.
and I was able to review a set of Orcas when they first came out. I mean, they're good goggles. So, but we'll see what happens. So it
Yeah,
does
yeah.
bear to
I,
mention.
yeah, I agree. And yeah, my wait and see will be what's the hardware technology in that the VRX is using, because that will be telling in terms of um, how much freedom there is for whomever is developing the firmware and the software, and
Yeah,
that will how prevalent is the hardware? Are there libraries? How quickly can it be debugged? Are there test buckets, et cetera, et cetera? So it gets down to a very interesting geeky hardware set of questions for me.
yeah,
Just
and I think the hard part is that people. I mean, every time a new HD solution comes out, everybody's got to change all their gear, and I think that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Whether early adopter DJI and Air units, or you're going HD0, or I mean, and then the new Dominator ecosystem. That's the expensive part. I think the nice thing about analog was one set of gear worked
More.
with everything. Yeah, and so as we get more and more specialized, it segments the hobby in different ways. Um, and that can get expensive for some. So I kind of understand that aspect.
Right.
If you're looking to do a case study on how not to launch a product, what they did last week was pretty good. Or how to get tons and tons of people talking attention about a product that's not released yet. I guess that's another way to go.
Yeah, I mean,
people look into your company.
Oh, I thought it was really funny, kind of following it last Friday, and like this whole thing about Walksnail came out, and then you could go to their website, and then it disappeared, and it was password protected. And then I like try, well, is the password? No. Is the password Walksnail? Yes. It's like, who puts the password Walksnail on their Walksnail website? Like, yeah. It was like the second password I guessed.
Yeah, for those of you following HD0, where they've created an ASIC, and it's they've dropped about $10 million of development into that ASIC. That's and XJet's making reference to that as well. That's the magic, and that's where this is going to get interesting. So we'll see what the hardware is, and then from where the hardware is, we'll get the firmware and software questions answered, and then we'll see how prevalent and how easy it is for other vendors to buy into the system, develop it, etc. Yeah.
So good times. So now that that's out of the way, and that was obviously the relevant news of the week. But let me get my screen shared here.
Yeah, if people really want to dig into that more, Joshua Bardwell's got a couple videos, and Joshua and It's Blunty did a pretty deep dive into it on their news segment last night as well.
So this is not drone related, but definitely FAA related. So let me get this pasted in here before I start going. So the FAA has revoked the pilot certificates who pulled off the Red Bull plane swap stunt. So if you haven't heard about this, there were two pilots. They basically exited their planes. They were supposed to swap planes in midair and continue flying. The attempt ended with one of the pilots successfully making the swap, while the other pilot had to parachute to the ground, and the other aircraft nose dived into the ground. So the FAA has responded by revoking the pilot certificates of both pilots. They will be unable to reapply for their pilot license for a year. And it has come out that the pilots did, one of the pilots, Akins, asked for an exemption from regulations prohibiting required crew members from leaving their stations while an aircraft is in flight. He claimed responsibility for moving forward with the stunt. And he also noted that he didn't share the information regarding the denied exemption. So definitely a pretty big deal, I would imagine.
Where's the $15,000 fine?
It's actually a $5,000 fine for violation of 3 regulations. So unless that is a $5,000 fine spread across, or whether it's for each. So violated 3 regulations regarding required flight crew members remaining at their stations, regarding the duty of the pilot to see and avoid other aircraft, and not operating an aircraft operating an aircraft in a careless and reckless manner. So definitely interesting. I've seen a lot of arguments out there that a lot of people, when it comes to some regulations, is just do like Red Bull does. Sometimes what Red Bull does results in something very bad. So definitely an interesting. What if they had been riding in remotely controlled airplanes instead? I mean, that's a possibility, but that would be definitely interesting. So remote controlled airplanes, and then
what if they had remote controls in their hands for the planes?
Yeah, well, if they were flying under 107 and they were on the ground and still the aircraft were in visible line of sight and they both maintained control, they could do it.
Yeah. So.
Well, I think they'd be over 400 feet.
That would be a problem.
I mean, one could say is that they could leave a pilot in there and then two guys would just swap planes, right? But that's probably been.
I think they did that already, though.
Yeah, so you got to one up it. So at a certain point, one upping it becomes impossible, as evidenced here.
Soon it'll be one plane, the pilot jumps out and goes back in.
So.
When I first heard about this, that's kind of what I thought was supposed to happen.
So full-size free flight isn't a thing. Yeah. All right. So there's a lot going on in the country right now, but Congress found time this week to have a hearing on UFOs. And apparently drones are responsible for some of the UFO sightings, but others are unexplained. So on Tuesday, a House subcommittee held a meeting discussing UFOs as well as the potential national security threat they pose. Sorry. Here.
Well, that would be great. Let's get Congress to focus on UFOs instead of drones as being the scary thing.
But then they'll say UFOs are drones.
They have to have remote
And we'll
ID.
be right back.
Then we'll know what they are.
Brilliant.
Maybe remote ID is just a way to rule out drones as actual UFOs. I mean, so Representative Andre Carson, the subcommittee chair, opened the meeting by noting that it has been over 50 years since the government ended Project Blue Book, the government's efforts to study UFOs. For more than 20 years, that project had treated unidentified anomalies in our airspace as a national security threat to be monitored and investigated. The group now refers to these as unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, no doubt in part to avoid the connotation of the term UFOs with aliens and conspiracy theories. Now I'm going to have to change my acronyms again. Jeez.
And
UAP.
I kept looking for nameplates of Agent Mulder.
I know, right? All right. This goes on and on and on, and there was definitely some footage shown. It says drones explain at least 2 UAP sightings. 2 of the instances demonstrated a similar UAP with a triangular flashing light taken several years apart. We are now reasonably confident that these triangles correlate to unmanned aerial systems, drones in the area. The triangular appearance is a result of light passing through the night vision goggle and then being recorded by an SLR camera. Bray then explained it was only through the multiple instances of similar effect that this conclusion was able to be reached, while also acknowledging that not all effects can be explained. So, I mean, hey, if you want to cause some drama, build a UAV that's looks like a UFO,
or just answer enough questions with Senator. I'd like to answer that question in the closed session.
Right. So hey, there you go. We're part of the UFO phenomenon now.
So how come they were able to get the acronym changed from UFO to UAP, but we can't get people to stop calling what we use drones when it's got a negative connotation to it?
Right.
People are gonna still call it UFOs, though. They're gonna forget that acronym.
It probably takes a generation or two for that kind of stuff to take effect, I imagine. All right, let's see. Real quickly, is UAP gender specific? It's a phenomena. So
gender neutral.
I would say no. I would say it's very gender neutral. All right, so the United States Air Force renews and extends partnership with the Drone Racing League to celebrate 75 years of innovation. United States Air Force and the Drone Racing League, the world's premier professional drone racing property, today announced a renewal and expansion of their partnership, supporting the Air Force's 75th anniversary theme to innovate, accelerate, and thrive. Partnership is designed to accelerate the skills of drone pilots around the world and to recruit the next generation of innovators in the U.S. Air Force. This year, the league will launch new programming during Military Appreciation Month, leading into the U.S. Air Force's 75th anniversary in September, coinciding with their 2022-2023 DRL Algorand World Championship season. So just continuing to partner up with them. Adding to their co-branded broadcast integrations, digital series aimed to teach aspiring FPV drone pilots on how to fly, and the U.S. Air Force boneyard maps and drone skins in the DRL Sim, a true-to-life drone racing video game. U.S. Air Force and DRL will unveil new cutting-edge content, immersive gaming, course gate, and pilot spotlights throughout the 2022-2023 championship season.
I wonder how much the drone use that people have been seeing in Ukraine has affected various people's thoughts about things like this, and how much the Air Force should be recruiting people and whatnot.
That's actually a interesting topic, because I mean, while there's a lot of military drone use happening, on both sides, there's a lot of, just basic homebrew drone use as well. Whether it's used for, I know a lot of I've read news articles. A lot of they're using them to identify troop movements and evacuate areas before armies move in and that kind of stuff. But as well as, even differing types of small drone combat uses.
And there's even been a lot of FPV footage of surveying areas and all kinds of things.
Yeah. And the hard part is with that, that negative connotation of the word drone that we've kind of fought for so long is now applying itself to that aspect, right? So it's definitely interesting. Let's see. Much safer than banning bombs, right? Let's see. Ukraine footage proves that we can put bombs on drones, so they must be banned. If they're lethal flying death machines, we just got to claim Second Amendment protection. We're golden. Okay. All right. So, then we got Amazon tried to postpone an investigation into a delivery drone crash because of an employee's dentist appointment.
What?
I don't think these things wait. So Amazon has tried to avoid federal investigations into delivery drone crashes, documents show. An Amazon representative tried to delay an FAA investigation by saying he had a dentist appointment, according to one document. Amazon is testing drones for future delivery options that will use autonomous drones. In one crash report seen by Insider, this is Business Insider, Federal Aviation Administration Inspector Jim Holden noted that Amazon's representative tried to postpone the crash inspection by saying he had a dentist appointment. In the same report, Holden wrote that Amazon had not provided photos and information about the incident a month after it happened.
Yeah, but the delivery was for Novocaine, so
The documents outline several instances suggesting that Prime Air tried to avoid or postpone investigations by the FAA, which regulates drone flights in the U.S. At least twice, Amazon removed drone wreckage before the FAA inspectors could investigate, according to the documents. An Amazon spokesperson said that Insider's characterization of the FAA documents was misleading and inaccurate, adding that Prime Air has complied with all incident reporting, investigation, and all other applicable regulatory requirements. The company also said it's now its policy to notify the agency before moving crash debris.
Well, I definitely removed my crash
policy.
debris before contacting the FAA, but
Crash debris? What's that?
That's your props, Alex.
Yep.
how about the
How can there be debris if you don't find anything?
I think that's the tack that Amazon's taking. Let's see. In the past year, at least 8 Amazon drones have crashed during testing, including one that ignited a 20-acre brush fire in eastern Oregon. So, those
sounds heated.
My crashes are usually so bad there's no debris. Yeah, my first drone crash that I actually witnessed was thankfully not mine. But one of my friends actually hit a tree, just clipped a tree, and the whole, like 20 pieces everywhere. It's really went one way, GoPro went another way. battery went, a complete opposite direction. It was insane. So, all right. For those who have, what happened? Lost my. Hey, there we go. DJI. So for those who subscribe to the DJI or who like it, looks like they may be coming out with a Cinewhoop version. We did just have the release of the DJI Mini Pro, which is like $1,000 mini, which is insanely expensive. Like, holy cow. And I know it's got a lot, but the whole point of the mini was like, availability. Yeah, exactly.
It's gonna break.
So,
It will be considered cheap when you see the prices of the other new drones, probably.
right? It's like, good hell. So, let's see. Two separate sources with a solid track record for leaking news about upcoming drones. Have shared photos and early details about another new first-person drone supposedly coming from DJI this summer, one specifically designed for capturing unique shots in tight indoor spaces. The DJI Mini 3 Pro is certainly already a smaller option as far as camera carrying drones, but it was designed that way so it would weigh less than 250 grams, and users wouldn't have to register it with the FAA. Not to make it easier to pilot in tight spaces. This new option would fill that niche with protection and other features the Mini 3 Pro lacks. For some background, a year ago, DJI released its first FPV drone, named DJI FPV drone. The company has a follow-up en route with a potential July or August debut featuring a Cinewhoop style design with ducted propellers that make it safer to operate indoors and more likely to survive a crash. A greater risk given where these types of drones are usually operated. So it'll be interesting. It is a tight little package. It's just a 3D rendering, obviously, but definitely interesting. We'll see. It's probably $2,000. So
Yeah, I could definitely see why DJI might go this route. I mean, with the popularity of all those fly-through videos we've been seeing lately, but I don't think the market's that huge for that. But
yeah, we'll see. I mean, it would be interesting.
Unless DJI is trying to use this as a way to, I don't know, get something to sell that doesn't have to have remote ID. Does that work? Can they say this is an indoor drone and then it doesn't need remote ID?
Well, I was thinking with remote ID, and it would be the only operation over people capable because it's under 250 grams.
Oh, this
So
one's
Is it
not under
playing?
250
Well,
though, is
I
it?
didn't think that was going to be under
it's not.
250,
Ooh,
so that
not
wouldn't
under
matter.
250.
Does it
So
have
they're
a
gonna need
size?
They're gonna need a
XJet's saying the
declaration of
Vada, which is what this one's called, is going to be 500 grams.
500 grams? Oh, it's
Yeah.
gonna need. Not only is it gonna need remote ID,
Well, no
it's gonna
matter
have to be
what,
a
either way, it
it'll have
needs
to be a
remote
category
ID.
2.
If
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
107, no matter what, it needs
I
remote
agree.
ID.
Well, not
Right.
if it's flown entirely
Not
indoors.
if it's flown indoors.
Yeah, but
I'm still not sure if.
But then you're not flying under 107.
Right.
You're not flying under anything.
I'm still not
There's no
sure that you're
jurisdiction,
allowed to
right?
sell a drone in the United States without remote ID starting this September, whether you fly it indoors or not.
That might have to be challenged in the courtroom.
Yeah, it might, because that's
I think
Probably depend on how it's worded.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's no
The regulations don't distinguish between that. So I mean, it doesn't say if a drone is, if a particular UAS is slated to only fly indoors, that you won't have to, that's a way to get out of it. There's no, it probably will have to be challenged. The safer bet would to be just put it on there and move on. But yeah, I agree with you, Sideburns. I do think it's a he's not in
the chat.
That's all right. But yeah, I would say it's probably just a rearranging of pre-existing components as well. They probably just took components out of the DJI FPV and moved them around. So
what I find interesting is they're covering. It looks like the camera's just pointing straight ahead, and then if you were to angle it up, half of it's going to be blocked by the top.
Yeah,
I was wondering about that too.
That's just weird and kind of bugs me.
It's only
Yeah,
meant
the
for
hood is-
chasing people downhill where you have the camera pointed down at them.
Well, the other problem with this is, and again, it's a 3D render, but at the same time, you're gonna need to be able to tilt that camera, because obviously the drone's gonna be flying forward, to capture shots. I would imagine they'd put it on a similar gimbal to like what the
Maybe
DJI
that's just the
FPV has.
rearward facing camera and we're looking at the back of the drone.
Right? That could be, for sure.
I
But
wonder if they figured out how to keep that thing from sucking itself to a wall.
Tiny whoops are so good at that.
they are. All right, so that's all I have for articles today. Pretty like I said, pretty slow news cycle. But I imagine
Keeping busy.
Dave's
We're keeping busy, yeah.
Dave's got some stuff.
I got we're leading a subgroup on the AAC, Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee, Tasking Group 13. And this one has to do with AAM. And interestingly, it's probably going to time out in time for the June 30 ACC meeting, which is supposed to be in person. We're going to try to attend that one in person. I think Alex may try to get to that one as well.
Well, I'm right next to DC, so I should be able to make it.
All they have to do is give us a location, and we should be able to handle that. Which the location, by the way, is not set. That's why we don't. That's why we don't know it. I'm also. I mentioned that we got FPV Freedom Coalition as a member of the drone safety team, formerly known as the UAS safety team, which it appears talked to itself, which of course is a normal phenomenon for folks around the Beltway. But this is over 80 associations, the similar crowd as on the ACC, but more companies, lots of great folks. And the objective is let's see if they can make some recommendations and do some productive work. And one of the things that we'll be working on, and I've got the lead to pull together a number of volunteers, is around it's the ASRS for small UAS. So the Aviation Safety Report System. What's the S?
Something like that.
And so this is we're going to take on our careful, committed, and civil hats, and we're going to be productive and see if we can make some sense out of this. A great program for crewed aircraft when they were saving lives, but if the objective is safety, then we really are thinking about battery safety, propeller safety, pre-flight, and do things in a normal way for flights. So we'll keep you posted on that as that goes forward. And then we're also starting up, as we had mentioned in the past, work on the 2023 Reauthorization Act. And in terms of events, Josh and I are headed to Flight Fest end of June. So that we'll be putting on an FPV experience. And Alex, I bet you're going to a race sometime soon.
Yeah, next race I have is Saturday.
Excellent.
It's up in Long Island.
Long Island. How far out on the island?
It's actually not far from one of the airports there. It's right next to the city.
Wow.
But yeah.
Outside, so must be just outside of the cone of silence for drones in New York City.
I guess so. I didn't look.
Yeah, the upside is Long Island is very long, so if it's real close, then it's not a terrible drive for you. But if you had said Hampton, then it would have been another couple hours for you. So that's great. And this is a multi-GP race?
Yes. Well, yeah. It's one of the chapters.
Great. And Josh, that's I think that's those are the items that we're working on. Keep them busy.
Okay, very good. So one of the things I do want to mention is pretty quick here, and I think we may have talked about this last week. I'm not sure, but just to kind of reiterate, we are coming up into reauthorization timeframes now. So we will be digging in onto that, and obviously trying to make an impact with the overall reauthorization. Um, so I do just want to alert everybody that it's kind of that time. Every 5 years, the FAA gets reauthorized, and that's where Congress sets the mandates that the FAA operates under in regards to everything they do. But in particular, of interest to us, obviously, is the UAS regulations. So as that comes up, and we start seeing some news on that, and we'll start sharing what we're working on, as well as ideas from the community, getting feedback. That's always supremely important to us, because we're just a couple of people. We want to know what everybody thinks, and I know that uh, these times where new potential regulations and rules come out, they can be stressful for everybody. Let's just be, as Dave puts it, professional, polite, and what was the other one?
Productive.
Productive. Yes, absolutely. So those as that comes out, but we'll keep you notified of our progress on that.
And Lenny mentioned a reference to Spectrum. Spectrum was part of the last, the 2018 Reauthorization Act, Section 374, and I'm sure that is one of the items on my list to nudge the FAA to complete what they were asked to do by Congress in 2018 to work with the FCC and the NTIA to allocate spectrum to UAS, so we have protected spectrum and it does not get auctioned out from under us to cell phone companies.
And Dave, there was some work done on that, right? But it didn't really get very far.
Did not get very far. They met a couple times, and I have not heard anything else. So yeah,
CBOs.
and we do have
yeah. So obviously that's the next thing. One of the things when the 2018 reauthorization, and Dan, that's still up on our website, right? The kind of timeline, or did we take that down?
It's probably still there, out of date.
So
but
yeah, definitely out of date. But the FAA is completely out of date. So
there hasn't been many changes. They haven't released a whole lot.
Yeah. So one of the things that they were supposed to do, I think within like 180 days, was to kind of bring CBOs out into the open, and give us a path for application and survival. So it's funny because they keep postponing this, and all their rules dictate that CBOs to kind of see
Work with the
CBOs, work
FAA.
with exactly all this stuff. But
CBO safety guidelines, CBO established FRIAs. Yep.
not only that, but CBOs as stakeholders in FAA regulations and whatnot. So, I mean, that to me, that's the key point, right? So, if they haven't defined CBOs, then they don't have any stakeholders that they need to work with. So, that's the unfortunate part, and definitely something that we've been pushing the FAA on to make some progress on. We did have the Oh, the words escape me at the moment. The
Well,
advisory that came out. Thank you. Requesting information. Everybody submitted
97,
information,
91-57
and then
Charlie.
went into the black hole of government. So,
Legendary is asking, what's a CBO? A CBO is a community-based organization. It's established by the FAA with it was mandated by Congress with a set of guidelines. You have to be a 501c3. You have to operate in education. You have to operate for the safety and the benefit of a community of UAS operators, essentially. And so they detailed it, Congress detailed it out pretty well. And the FAA was supposed to, as Josh was saying, within 180 days of the issuance in October 2018 of the FAA Reauthorization Act, they were supposed to have CBOs up and running and established. And so here we are at 2022, and they're still not established as any organization being able to be a CBO. And so FPVFC, we put ourselves together as a 501c3 to become a CBO. Flight Test created a 501c3, Flight Test Community Association, to be a CBO. And of course, the AMA established a 501c3, and one of their capabilities would be a CBO.
And
Yeah,
sort of
and
adding on to what TechJet was saying, that there's no rational thought coming up with all these regulations, it's also that things don't happen in a proper order. Things just happen at the
happen.
pace that each thing happens, like what we saw with that thing from way back in 2019, was it? Where they were working
20
on something and then they released it 2017?
2017, yeah.
And
And
they
it was
released it and it
the
references Section 336, which has now been eliminated.
repealed.
So
Right. Yeah. So that was the manufacturer's safety requirement. So all manufacturers are required to make
A safety statement.
operators aware of this set safety statement, and they have provided, FAA has provided samples and encourages manufacturers to provide this safety statement for everyone who purchases a UAS, and there's no date on it. So, like Dan says, they got right on it in 2017, and events have overtaken them a little bit. So, yeah, there are references in that one-page statement in their sample to a CBO. So,
yeah,
oops.
a lot of especially recreational regulations mention CBOs, and yet they've never, beyond defining what they are, they've never given us a path to become one. So right now there are no existing CBOs, no AMA, no FPVFC, no FTCA, and there's several others that I imagine would fall into that category as well. I imagine Multi-GP would want to fall into that.
they could.
Maybe.
Oh,
I mean, it'd be a route
not a
for them, right?
501c3. Need to start
No,
it.
but I mean, you could. I mean, as a
Yeah.
an ability to do some extra things for its members, right? So whether they're looking at it or not, it's an option for a lot of different organizations around the country.
CBO status for someone working with multi-GP is critically important, so that we press the FAA to establish temporary or fast turnaround on FRIAs, so that they can set up a race and at a location that is not a permanent flying site.
Yeah. So anyway,
forgive the interruption.
Oh, you're fine.
I was wondering, and I know this is kind of way off left field, if a CBO can be defined as not a physical thing, like doing some actual community thing, but a protocol thing. For example, can the community of developers from ELRS become a CBO because you're setting a de facto or standard or protocol? I want to focus on protocols, not standards. And can we take something that's open source developed and turn it into, well, this is a real community of developers, of people that contribute to everybody in the world? And can that be defined as a CBO? Because it's not a physical get together, it's a code get together.
I don't know that there would be any benefit.
Stretch.
Well, no, I just don't think there would be any benefit to you, because if you set up as an LLC or a Chapter S or any type of for-profit structure, you can operate as a development organization, and you'd have better protections for intellectual property, whereas 501c3, which is what the FAA has stipulated is required. It has to be, is a usually a charitable, and it has an education based, and there are rarely products coming out of that type of entity, and it gets tricky if you're producing and releasing something that has intellectual property.
So that
The other-
becomes a generic question then, like, can a open source project tie to a 501c3 for education purposes? And if it could, it seems like a stretch still.
I don't
Right.
know.
Well,
I think it's a great idea from an educational perspective. I mean,
Right,
Yeah, I
because you
think-
have all the foundations of all the open source stuff that everything the project leaves behind is this
Yeah.
public domain educational thing. Could it be? Could we spin up a 501c3 that does something? Who would be part of it? I'm just brainstorming. I've never mentioned this to anyone. I just had a reaction to what you talked about.
Well, I would, a couple different things, just some thought process. So if it was like ELRS, one of the things behind that would be the frequencies used, right? So I think you would be better served, like Dave was saying, being like an LLC, and because if you're looking to normalize a specific frequency, you're going to need to uh, be able to influence uh, members of Congress or stuff like that to help you kind of keep that segment of the control signal kind of free from places like we were mentioning earlier, cell phone companies and that kind of thing. Whereas a 501c3, it limits the amount you can lobby. So stuff like that might be more beneficial to actually be like a corporation.
That's why I thought of it as a protocol, not standards. And of course, the LRS was sort of an example that came into my mind as I was speaking, because the protocol is actually Crossfire, but that's like deeply defined. Like, is there some Uber protocol? And I want to say protocol, I mean, as a
well, I think you
de
might
facto
be,
standard.
as I was thinking of de facto and de jure standards, and there are international standards development bodies. I'm a member of ASTM, and I do not know what organizational structure they're under.
They're on, yeah.
They have a ton of intellectual property, and it's their objective is to disseminate a lot of information in a very orderly manner. So, acting like a standards body might not be a bad approach either.
Right, and then can that be brought in as a CBO into this thing? Is like, well, we're real, we're doing this. What are you defining?
I don't know that there's any benefit to you. I mean, it could hinder you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There are real restrictions to being a 501c3. You can't lobby Congress.
Yeah.
To be very careful.
I'm not, by the way. I'm obviously personally, I'm not anything. It's just a
right
wild idea. Sorry.
Love ideas. No apologies necessary. Love the thought process.
And then the deep rooted of it is this sort of a triggering reaction that came from, oh, could it be a de facto protocol, right? Like, and then when I say protocol, like, because I'm sort of on this bandwagon of protocols, not standards, right? Not something that's set by a committee, of people that are like SEMTI or any kind of ATSC. I don't want to say ATSC, like any kind of committee-based stuff where the contributors are like participants from many corporations. I'm talking about real life, more like something that grows from the open source community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Defined as a standard, but they follow standards. But sometimes they accidentally define standards because they work a certain way. So if you publish something that's all from scratch, built by the open source community, and it can be defined as a standard, right? That's like a de facto protocol. I'm flipping it around. You see, de facto standard is a protocol, or a de facto protocol. This grew and it has a life of its own, and therefore it's a CBO. Right. So you see, I'm stretching it a lot, right? But anyway, we'll stew on it until some other time. Maybe something else will come out of it. Sorry for the disruption. Thanks, guys.
No, it was interesting line of thought. Thank you.
So Legendary says, could the same exact group of people all form a CBO, an LLC, a 501c3, all under the same name?
No, explicitly
no.
No. You can, if you are a for-profit corporation, you cannot then become a 501c3. If you are a 501c3, you can transform to become a for-profit. But you cannot be both, and there are paths that are restricted.
But you can sort of have a parent company that spins off a 501c3.
Absolutely.
as
at least
flight
sister
test.
companies.
That's what the AMA did, and that's what
Yep.
Flight Test has done. Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And
As long
AMA
as
has
the roots of it are open source and community contributors, that's where
Yeah.
like it has to come from truly community open source stuff, and then create an entity that represents the protocol that's defined in the code.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I was open source only in the software zone, and so we create, as in FPV Freedom Coalition creates no source code, no intellectual property in that regard, but we help advocate the FAA, and we create a fair amount of intellectual capital, which we share openly, and we're also big into educating the community, and those are the tenets behind the mission of why we exist.
Right.
So to Legendary's question, but they can all be legally unrelated, but it's the same people running it with the same name. So yes, you can
Yes,
have
absolutely.
so like F Flight Test, they have the Flight Test that the for-profit side, and then they've got the FTCA, and there are people who operate both essentially. So that is, but the point comes with a 501c3 and a LLC or whatever Flight Test is. You cannot, you got to be extremely divisive on how you separate the two in terms of financials is the key point.
Yeah, Lenny says related, and that's so that's separate. That's a good delineation. That's a good, I'd say that's a good comment. Yeah, a chapter S and a 501c3 could be related. They just need to be separate entities. Fair comment.
So, all right, good discussion.
Compiled, I love it. COBOL.
Fortran.
Hey, I was talking to a COBOL programmer a couple months ago. She's still making a living being a COBOL consultant. So it's a good business to be in. You can set your own hours.
There you go. Funny. All right. Anything else? Dan, you got anything for us?
Nope.
For
Alex?
Hexjet, a Chevy man, coded in COBOL. You're the man. I love it. Ford, I'm sorry. Yeah, but it's a 454 that keeps throwing me off.
All right. So good discussion, guys. Good topics. Do appreciate having you guys here. We'll be back in 2 weeks with some more, hopefully, some more news. Hopefully, the drama's calmed down a little bit in the FPV scene, and we've gotten over the latest things. So, but with that, I'll give you back the rest of your evening. Thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you. Everyone, take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.